As these myths suggest, the double is a soul mate of intense warmth and closeness. Love between men and love between women, as a psychic experience, is often rooted in projection of the double, just as anima animus is projected in love between the different sexes. And as with anima animus, such love may occur within or without the heroic quest. Furthermore, since the double is a soul figure, the sexual instinct may or may not become involved. That is, the double motif may include a tendency to homosexuality, but is not necessarily a homosexual archetype. Rather, the double embodies the spirit of love between those of the same sex. And the spirit of love in the double is what I see as the supportive ground of the ego. Double fuses the fate of two into one. We see this in Tolkien's The Return of the King, in which Frodo could never have made his great and epic trek to Mount Doom without Sam, his faithful servant. Quote, "So that was the job I felt I had to do when I started," thought Sam, "to help Mr. Frodo to the last step." Unquote. In Robinson Crusoe, the hero would not have survived the cannibals without his companion Friday. Mark Twain several times focused on this double motif, for example, in his The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. It is Huck and Jim, the black slave whose fates and affections are bound together towards freedom on the great river. In The Prince and the Pauper, the plot hinges on the interacting destiny of two identical boys. In this way, the double is facilitative of rapport. It creates an atmosphere between the friends of profound equality and deep familiarity, a mysterious, joyful sharing of feelings and needs, a dynamic, intuitive understanding. As Confucius wrote in commenting on hexagram 13, Fellowship with Men in the I Ching, quote, "But when two people are at one in their inmost hearts, they shatter even the strength of iron or bronze. And when two people understand each other in their inmost hearts, their words are sweet and strong, like the fragrance of orchids." Unquote. By the way, orchids has a serious symbolic, mystical meaning in Taoist mysticism, evidently. Such a pleasurable camaraderie easily extends to a sharing of purpose or goal through which difficult tasks are undertaken and fulfilled. The Greeks, for example, exploited this trait in creating their marvelous armies, especially the Spartan. The Theban sacred band, composed entirely of pairs of lovers, was reputed to have been extraordinarily victorious. A similar institution is observed in some of the Native American cultures, such as the Blackfoot. Quote, "There was another and even closer relationship between boys in the same band, that of partners. Two boys of about the same age became close companions. They played together as children, helped each other in courting girls, went to war together, and offered advice and assistance to each other whenever it might be needed. If a young man was wounded in battle, his partner risked his life to carry him to safety and stayed behind the rest of the war party until the disabled man was able to be helped home. In many instances, this close friendship and mutual assistance between partners continued through the rest of their lives." Unquote. But such camaraderie in more diluted form animates most groups of men and groups of women. This archetypal motif is primary to cooperative pursuits, and in our culture is fostered and shaped at an early age. If, as I suggest, the double is the root of ego identity, it may lead one to significant self-realizations. This is the symbolic meaning of its presence in the hero myth. For many, the double can unlock creative processes. I believe this was the case in certain famous collaborations. For example, between Gilbert and Sullivan, Picasso and Braque, and Marx and Engels. As a source of strength and inspiration, the double can be a great driving force in a person and collectively in the growth of arts and sciences. As Lamb explains in his introduction to Plato's Symposium, quote, "Love is here treated with a sense of its universal importance," unquote. It means homosexual love, even though it's said to be love. It's not thought that way. It's a problem with the technicalities of language. Love is here treated with a sense of its universal importance, of how we may pass with ever-wakening and widening powers to the best and freest activity of our faculties, the contemplation of invisible, eternal verity." Unquote. In ancient Athens, it was believed that two lovers, Harmodius and Aristogeiton, sparked the flame of democracy. in modern times the work of many artists, such as Gertrude Stein, Oscar Wilde, André Gide, and so on, may be regarded as a product of self-growth stimulated by the double. As to be expected, however, such growth occurs only to those who recognize the inner urgings of the double and allow themselves to follow in this direction. In order to grow through the double, one must be open to its function as inner soul guide. A lot taller order than what it may sound like at that point. The variation of the youth adult. The manifest double may not always be of the same age, the same level of experience and maturity as the ego representative in a story or a symbolic system. In fact, quite often in literature we find a somewhat older person bound through the double with someone younger. This is the case with Harmodius and Aristogiton. However, the dynamic energy motivating such pairs still involves an equal sharing of responsibility and action, an equal give and take in the heroic quest. For this reason, I refer to all such pairs as archetypal, quote, partners, unquote. When the age difference becomes pronounced, for example, when one member of the pair is an adolescent, while the other is a mature adult, the numinous power of shared strength inherent in the partners often shifts to powers of guidance and inspiration. In this case, we find an older person guiding a younger one into adulthood, while in return the younger person inspires new strength in the principles or the particular quest of the older. Because this pattern is different from that of the partners, while still an aspect of the double motif, I call it the youth adult. The youth is the one who is immature, who is moving or questing, while the adult is the one who knows, who has become mature, or who has wider experience or more depth. These images are inherent in us, constituting a part of our unconscious potential, which may be actualized during times of personal growth or due to complexes or other factors. At such times, the youth and adult will be stimulated in us and can lead to the kind of psychic change symbolized by the passage from youth to adult. The youth-adult archetype is particularly significant in education, manifesting itself between student and teacher. This double motif was called paiderastia in ancient Greece and was institutionalized in several of the city-states. Oscar Wilde has ascribed the youth-adult in his novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, quote, talking to him, the boy, was like playing upon an exquisite violin. He answered to every touch and thrill of the bow. To project one's soul into some gracious form, and let it tarry there for a moment. To hear one's own intellectual views echoed back to one with all the added music of passion and youth. To convey one's temperament into another as though it were a subtle fluid or a strong perfume. There was a real joy in that, unquote. In such a relationship, the student may gain loving guidance and stimulation to self-growth. The teacher may achieve deeper self-understanding reflected in scholarly or artistic expression. Quote, relationships of this sort were incendiary to the splendid proliferation of genius in the creative arts in both ancient Greece and Italy, unquote. Such love has been associated with Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, Shakespeare, and Bacon. The youth-adult archetype may shay off into two others, the youth leading to the puer aeternus, or puella aeterna, and the adult becoming the wise old person, the wise man if one is male, the wise woman if one is female. This shading is due to the thematic proximity of these various motifs and may result in an experiential combination of archetypes or a shift from one to another. A common situation is one in which the youth-adult evokes the puer. This occurs in the Picture of Dorian Gray, in which the initial relationship of Lord Henry and Dorian dissolves into a condition of Dorian alone as the profligate young beauty. Thus, as well as leading to psychic growth, the youth-adult may lead to a permanent state of psychic immaturity. This results when one becomes trapped in the seductive power of the youth, the negative side of the puer aeternus. Such was the fate of Aschenbach and Thomas Mann's Death in Venice. The puer remains forever undeveloped if he remains forever attached to the Great Mother. He provides access to the original self and its inspirations, while simultaneously blocking the path to individuation. This marks a distinction between the puer and the double, the former concerned with timeless adolescence, the latter with the strength to individuate. It is because of this involvement in ego change that often admit the double, as partner or youth, figure dies or disappears in the middle of the tale, imparting a fateful momentum to the ego symbol. For example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Enkidu's death is a logical extension of his function, symbolizing a new maturity and bringing about a more sublime realization on the part of the hero. Dark aspects of the double. Every archetype has its destructive features. The double being a multifaceted archetype or a group of closely interrelated archetypes, just as the anima includes the Great Mother and the feminine soul guide, has several dark aspects. One of these involves the puer aeternus, as we have just seen. Another is the shadow, that is, aspects of the double, such as a tendency toward homosexual expression, may be rejected by the ego and fall into the shadow personality. This is due to the similarity of the double and the shadow in relation to the ego. Each is a source deeper than the conscious personality. While the double is typically the font of conscious ego identity, the shadow is typically that of morally inferior ego identity. Therefore, it is to be expected that rejected aspects of the double will tend to collect in the shadow unconscious. On the practical level, as misogyny often shows a negative anima projection, so homophobia, fear and hatred of homosexuals, can be the projection of negated double aspects from the shadow. At the same time, in a culture which condemns overt manifestations of love based on the double, a particular burden falls on those who experience such feelings. Not only must they struggle against moral and social prejudices, but also against the shadow evil imparted through collective censure. Mixing shadow and double produces vicious stereotypes, such as the lisping homosexual, and these stereotypes too often become facets of personality. It is because of this that some psychologists have interpreted homosexual love as arising out of shadow. The negative side of the partner is the competitor, the mythical figure of the same stature as the partner, but who is committed against the hero's success. Whereas the partner strives to enhance the ego, the competitor desires to supplant it. An example of the competitor is Hector in the Iliad. Just as Achilles and Patroclus are bound together in love and guidance, so Achilles and Hector are united in hatred and vengeance. As Achilles says to Hector at their fateful meeting, "Lions and men make no truce. Wolves and lambs have no friendship. They hate each other forever. So there can be no love between you and me, and there shall be no truce for us until one of the two shall fall and glut Ares with his blood." The negative archetype always contains the force of the positive, including the drive toward individuation. The competitor presents a challenge to overcome, and thus provides an image of oneself to grow into. However, the image is posed in a negative context as a threat. Because of this, it is often easily projected, and can become a major factor in stimulating interpersonal aggression and competition. Furthermore, in a society such as ours, in which aggression and competition are encouraged among men and women, of course, negative partner projection will be thereby stimulated. And this can lead to hostility and resentment, either overt or covert, toward men in general. We might call such a situation a competitor complex. Or since often the prime competitor is a man's father, for a man, we could in such cases place this phenomenon under the Jungian heading of father complex, but rather for the son than for the daughter. Up to that point, you see the notion of father complex only in relation to the daughter. In print, you never see this way of associating. See how odd it is to see differently. One can see this complex on the collective level as stimulating such manly pursuits as war. And further, fixation on the competitor archetype can help block the constructive impulses inherent in the double motif. For the person who blindly spurns the love overtures of the double, the rebuffed archetype may take revenge through transformation into this negative. Such could have been the fate of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, if at their first meeting they had not recognized the love force between them.